We looked at the programmable read-only memory, where we said the information which has been stored on this memory cannot be altered. Okay, it cannot be altered, but can be reprogrammed to a different instruction. So we also have the erasable. Okay, the erasable programmable read-only. The erasable programmable read-only can be erased by programming. Okay, we can erase them by programming. So we also have the electrically erasable programmable. I'm just going through to refresh our memories on where we stopped. We also looked at the electrically erasable programmable read-only memory. Now here the instructions can be removed, but by making use of what we call electrical signals. So we expose the RAM or the ROM to electrical signals such that we can erase them or change them. Okay, so that's where we stopped. Now today we are going to continue with what we call other options of memory. Now you'll most likely encounter what we call virtual memory. Now virtual memory is mainly applicable in computers that have very less memory, for example the RAM. Now it is possible that your RAM is little and you're trying to run a big program on your computer, but because the RAM is little, our operating systems, that is to say the Windows operating system or the Linux operating system, depending on which program you're running, is going to get part of the hard disk, and it maintains it or keeps it as what we call virtual memory, such that it can add some little memory to what the RAM has. Okay, so the RAM is going to increase on its capacity by making use of what we call the virtual memory. That is what virtual memory is. Then we have what we call cache memory. The cache memory is actually what resides on a cache chip. Now this cache chip is near the when you see it on a motherboard, you know the motherboard where we find the components of the computer, the internal components. On the motherboard, when you see the microprocessor or the CPU, you'll actually notice that the cache memory is very close to the CPU. This is because we want to reduce the time of accessing whatever is on the cache memory. Okay? So the cache memory is a memory which is a fast memory. Okay, we call it a special high-speed memory area that the CPU can easily access or can quickly access. So it can be the location in the CPU or the system board planner. So we find it on the system. Okay, we have what we call the video memory, or what we call VRAM. Now, when we are using or when we are displaying images, graphics, things to do with the graphics, images, videos, and so on our computers, it is the work of the VRAM to make sure that we store these images before we display them. So we call this video memory or the VRAM as a storage display images for the monitor. So the size of this memory mainly depends on two factors: how fast the images appear and the number of colors available. Okay, if the images appear very fast, for example, when you open an image and it appears very fast without wasting much time on your computer, it means you have a very good virtual video memory or VRAM. Okay, then if also the number of colors displayed are so many, Mark, please, let's maintain order. Mark, let's maintain the order. You have to remove whatever you've written on our screen. So yeah, so now the video memory also depends on the number of colors available on the screen, on the image. If you're displaying an image and the numbers of colors you can see on that image are many, it means your video memory is okay. Okay, all right. Then we also have what we call flash memory. many of us know what flash disks look like or what a pen drive looks like. So the special memory or the special non-volatile memory chip we find in the USB, in the flash disks is what we call the flash memory. So it is used to supplement the hard disk in a way that it provides us with an extra memory on which we can store our data or information. So that is the flash memory. The memory we find in flash disks is what we call flash memory. Okay, moving on. Let's look at what we call memory size. Now, when data is entered into the computer members through a device such as a keyboard, okay, through a device such as a keyboard, or by speaking to it by using a voice recognition device program, this information has to be stored on the computer before it is, before or after it is processed, okay? Now, when we store this information, it has to be stored in a way that the computer can convert it from the characters we're seeing to what it can store, okay? Now, when we talk about the memory size, we're actually dealing with how the computer analyzes how big this data is, okay? Now, if I write a sentence, a word, or a name of a person, a name of a human being, say, for example, I type the name Arnold, okay? Arnold Victor. If I type those two names, now it is the work of the computer to calculate how much space to spare for these names to be stored on the computers, okay? The computer memory. So the computer is going to analyze, it's going to identify, it's going to find out. Joshua, I see your hand is up. Okay, I think it was a mistake, sorry. All right, so the computer makes sure it comes up with a way of storing this data by first calculating the size, okay? So that size it calculates is what we call a memory size. Now, normally we express the computer capacity data by converting it from one system to another, what we call the coding system. Computers store information in bytes, okay? And in our definitions, when you look at these definitions here, we call a bit a 0 or a 1, which is the smallest unit of measurement when it comes to conversions or the computer memory size, okay? But when we start grouping this bit into groups of 8, 4, and so on and so on, we come up with other units, okay? So when we have 8 bits grouped together, forming a character, okay? Forming a character, we call that a byte, meaning each character you see in a word is 80 bits. The 8 bits are represented as a series of the zeros and ones until they make the 8 bits. So when you look at the name Victor, a character in that name, Victor, will be the letters, okay? The characters will be the letters. And each character we have said is 8 bits, meaning each character is 1 byte. That is why after some time you'll be asked to calculate how much space is required to store the name Victor, okay? So I'm just going to share another screen to explain this more, okay? So I'm going to open Notepad. I'm going to share a screen so that we can see this clearly. I'll be using this to explain. Okay, I'm hoping that you can see the second screen I've just shared. Joshua, don't worry, we're coming there. A coding system. Okay, I'm going to answer this immediately after, or as I'm explaining whatever I'm going to explain. Now, I hope you are all seeing. You're all seeing the second screen I have. I have what? I have shared. Now I'm just going to increase the size here. Now, when you look at our size, our notepad here, the notepad window I've just opened, I'm going to use it to explain. And I'm going to request all of you to please make sure you type reasonable things in the chat section. Okay, that shows a level of indiscipline. Here we are conducting a lesson. Some people are typing weird things on the chat section. Please let us maintain the order, because I have the right to remember I have the right to remove Sebagala. I can remove you from this class and someone else joins. Many people are wanting to join. So please make sure. And the writing in your books, you can take small notes, because I understand some of you have the notes in your books already. So what I'm doing is I'm explaining the notes you already have. Okay. All right. Now let's look at memory size. We have said a bit is either 1 or a 0. And then we have also said that a byte is a group of, okay, Harry, unmute your microphone and you speak. Harry, unmute your microphone and you can speak. Harry, you have a question, unmute and speak. Okay, I think he has nothing to say. So we have said a byte is a group of 8 bits. Okay, so if there are 8 bits, that makes what we call a group. But in between 1 byte and 8 bits, we have also a group of 4 bits is what we call a nibble. Okay, so we must get some of these words. Now, in order for us to convert from one form to another, we must understand, for example, if you're asked to find how much space is needed to store the name Victor. Okay, and yet we have said the 8 bits represent a what? The 8 bits represent a character. Okay, the 8 bits represent a character. What does it mean? Joshua, unmute your microphone and you ask whatever you want to ask. Joshua, I see your hand is up. Please unmute. Joshua, unmute and speak.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, what's a byte?
A byte. I've just said yes. A byte is a group of 8 bits. I've just written it.
A bit. What's a bit?
A bit is either 1 or 0. It is the smallest, the basic unit we can use to measure computer memory. Is it okay? It's actually here on this other screen I just shared. A bit is the smallest unit of measurement. Okay? Is it clear?
Sir.
All right.
It's clear, sir.
Okay. Okay. Now, coming back to now when we have 4 bits put together, we form what we call a nibble. When we have 8 bits put together, we form what we call a byte. Now, questions you'll always find questions in your examinations. Find how much space is needed to store the name Victor. And yet we have said 8 bits represents 1 character. Now, all we have to do is identify the characters in the name Victor. First of all, how many characters are in that name Victor? Okay, let me retype it in capital letters. So find how many characters are in the name Victor. We are going to count how many characters. Now, each character is going to be standing for a letter. Okay, a letter represents 8 characters. So someone is saying there are 6 characters here. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 6 characters in the name Victor. Now, after finding the number of characters, and yet we have said each character represents 8 bits. Okay, represents 8 bits or 1 byte. Each character represents 8 bits or what? 8 bits or 1 byte. Now, if there are 6 characters, then we shall have how many bytes? There are 6 bytes. Okay, 6 bytes in the name Victor. Okay. Now, if there are 6 bytes and we want to find this in the number using number of bits, now using the number of bits, the name Victor will need about how many bits? 8 times the 6. 8 times the 6 bytes. Okay, because in each byte we have 8 bits. So we shall have about how many? 8 times 6, what do we get? 8 times 6.
48.
Exactly, 48. So we shall have 48 bits in the name Victor. So the computer has to reserve how many number of bits? 48 bits to store this information. Okay, I hope the conversion is clear. Now, sometimes you will even be asked to find the number of how much storage space is needed by the computer to store the sentence, my name is Victor. Now, the same thing applies here. They can tell you to put this in bytes, okay? Now, the full stop is inclusive. Now, all you have to understand is that even this space in between this towards my name is a character. Let me repeat that. Then the space between the two names is a character. So whenever a question like this comes, you have to identify all the characters, including the spaces, because here now, if we are to count how many characters we have, we shall have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18, including the full stop. Okay, so the full stop must also be stored in the computer. Now, if we have 18 characters, then each character represents 1 byte, sorry. That means we can find the number of bytes stored that the computer needs to store this sentence. We shall need about 18 bytes. If we want to find that using the number of bits, we are going to multiply the 18 by 8 to get the number of bits the computer memory has to reserve to store this sentence. Okay, so that is how the computer does its conversion. Now, so how would you identify the number of spaces skipped? Now that will depend. Yeah, someone has given us the answer is 108 bits. Yes, thank you. Now, Caesar, you'll actually notice that a space, you can identify one space. When you notice, if I add another space in between is and Victor, there are 2 spaces there, because when you look at this space, it's bigger than that one. But normally when they're giving you these questions to answer, they'll have to make sure that the number of spaces you can actually see. But also when you are coming up with sentences, it is advisable to leave a space between the words. Okay, we just skip one space. So if you're given this question in a paper, an exam, you'll have to just see that we have 1 space in between a sentence, in between 2 words if you are writing a sentence. Okay? All you have to do is you have to be careful to even notice the punctuations. Okay, so someone is asking, sir, is it true that computers have a specific language? Yes, computers speak the language of zeros and ones. We are going to come to that in the future. Okay, especially when we are looking at computer software. Yes, the computers have a specific language. However, there are other languages that we can use to work with the computer that have to be converted to the language the computer understands. So if I'm speaking to my phone through the speech recognition program, Google Assistant or Siri, it's going to convert what I've spoken, first of all, to text. Then from text, it is going to convert it to zeros and ones using some coding systems we are going to look at. Okay. Now, we also have to understand that these bits can be represented in terms of other units. For example, we have what we call a kilobyte, okay? So 1 kilobyte is equivalent to, now you have to take note of this. This is a unit, this is a relationship, just like we have in centimeters and meters. Someone has a question? Edward, you have a question?
Yes.
Yes, please ask. Okay, I think Edward doesn't have. If you have a question, members, you have to use the reactions to put up your hand so that I can let you speak. Okay? You have to maintain that order. So looking at the relationships, just like we said, we have 100 centimeters in 1 meter. It's a relationship we all know. How many grams do we have in 1 kilobyte? 1 kilogram, about 1,000 grams. So just like those relationships, we also have these relationships in computers. So in computing memory size, we have this relationship of 1 kilobyte being equivalent to 1,000 excuse me, 1,024 bytes. Okay, that is a very classic relationship we must understand. This relationship here is what will help us convert from the number of bytes to the number of kilobytes. Now, in this sentence, someone had already given us the answer as 108 bits, okay, which is equivalent to how many bytes? 18 bytes, okay, 18 bytes. Now, if you were told to write this number of bytes in terms of kilobytes, we are going to use this relationship. Now, if we have 18 bytes and yet 1 kilobyte is equal to 1,024 bytes, what will happen if we have 18 bytes? It's going to be a relationship to convert from bytes to, where we have to divide the 18 bytes by 1,024. So the number of kilobytes we shall have here will be 18 divided by the 1,024 to find the number of kilobytes in bytes, okay? So that will give us the number of kilobytes in 18 bytes. I see someone. So the 24 came from where? It is a standard unit. Now, I think you're asking that question because normally you normally think that the kilobyte is equal to 1,000 something, okay? We have 1 kilogram is equal to 1,000 bytes, but that is something to do with, because here we are dealing with computer memory. This is the exact number of bytes, okay? Though some people just decide to use it as 1,000 bytes, which is not the case. The exact number of bytes the computer has in 1 kilobyte is 1,024 bytes. It is standard, okay? So it's not 1,000. It is not 1,000. Rather, it is 1,024 bytes. That is the standard. So the 24 came from the number of bytes, okay? So don't be scared. So this will be the number of kilobytes we shall find in that sentence called, that sentence, my name is Victor. Of course, if we can get relationships between the kilobyte and the bytes, we can also get the relationship between 1 megabyte. Exactly. So, my answer is 124 bits. Adrian, I don't know what you're saying there. Okay, we also have a relationship between 1 megabyte in terms of kilobytes. So if we have 1 megabyte in kilobytes, we shall also have 124 kilobytes. Okay, 1,024 kilobytes. Then if we want to convert these megabytes to bytes, now we know that in 1 kilobyte we have 1,024 bytes. What about in 1,024 bytes? So we shall have this times the number of bytes, okay, to find the number of bytes in what? To find the number of bytes in a megabyte, okay? To find the number of bytes in a megabyte. So that will give us the number of bytes in a megabyte. Of course, and then we also have gigabytes. In 1 gigabyte, we shall have about 1024 megabytes. Okay, megabytes. So we can also convert these 1 GB to bytes. Okay, so that is how we do the conversions here in memory size. I hope it is clear. Okay, I hope it is clear. All you have to know is make use of the relationships. Of course, after the gigabytes, we also have what we call the terabytes, which is going to also be to be 1024, equivalent to 1024 gigabytes. Okay, so those are the relationships we use in order to make sure we make these conversions. All right, now coming back to our presentation, we're going to move on to the next slide. Now, remember I told you the computer has to convert these words, the characters, into something it can understand. So whenever we are writing words whenever we are typing in our computer, the words we understand. For example, right now, we are reading the binary coding schemes stroke standards. We can understand this, but the computer doesn't understand it the way we are understanding it. The computer must make sure it stores it in terms of the binary system, zeros and ones. That brings us to what we call coding schemes or coding standards. Okay, the coding standards are the ones that help to convert the words or the text we are dealing with in the computing systems to what the computer can understand. So they are mainly two coding systems we use to perform this. We have what we call the EBCDIC, Extended Binary Coded Decimal Interchange. It is a system the computers can use to convert from the characters to what we call the binary system. Then we also have the ASCII, the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. So these are the two binary coding schemes or coding standards we can use to convert the words to what the computer can understand. For example, if you look at this table here, using the ASCII, we have, someone is asking question. Okay, yeah. All right, using ASCII, we normally present these characters to about 7 decimal places. So the difference between the ASCII and the EBCDIC is that the ASCII represents its characters to 8 to 7 bits. Now, how do I know that there are 7 bits? A is represented in this way. The character A has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bits. So we said a bit is either 1 or 0. So in other words, when I ask you how many bits do we represent the ASCII codes in, it will be 7 bits. How do I know? By counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because each 1 is a bit, even 0 is a bit. So how many bits? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then when we look at the ABCDIC, it represents its characters to 8, okay? To 8 binary, to 8 what? Bits. Okay, that is the main difference between the two. So these are the two codes, these coding schemes that help us to convert the words to what the computer can understand in order for it to either store it or process it. I hope it is clear. Okay. Teacher, what if I type the binary codes directly to a laptop? What happens? Yes, now that one is what the computer understands. The computer is going to take it the way it is because you have given it something you understand. But still, when you're typing those words, make sure you're typing them at the lowest level. How? If you type your words, if you type your letters, the zeros and the ones, if you type them in a program called probably Microsoft Office Word or any program you can type in, the computer is not going to look at it as what? The zeros and ones it's going to look at it as a different thing. So it has to convert what you've put there, but still using the binary code. Now, what you must understand is that, Raphael, these are not the only characters which can be converted, okay? Even the numbers 1 can be converted to binary, okay? Okay. I see who? Joshua, you have a hand up. please unmute your microphone and ask your question. Joshua?
Sir, where did the ones and zeros come from? Can't you just put 1, 1, 1, 1?
Now, the ones and the zeros, like I told you, they are just represented. It is what the computer uses. If I type, for example, now your name is who? Joshua. The letter J, I have to come here. In order for the computer will understand it in this way. Let me go back to my what? To my notepad here. Okay. Now, we have typed the name. We have typed in the name Joshua. Okay. Now, we have typed this name. The computer is not understanding it in this way. Assuming my computer uses the ASCII code to convert this Joshua to the language the computer can understand, I am going to do that by looking at J. First of all, J is represented by what? Here we have, when we see J is represented by this. Okay, 1 0 1 1 0 0 1 0 1 0. Okay. So we shall have the J is represented by 1 0 0 1 0 1 0. That is J. Then we also go for O. Okay. We also look for O. Here we have O somewhere. Let me see. We have O. O is 1 0 0, then 1 1 1 1 4 times. Okay. And then we shall also add a 1 0 0 1 1 1 1. That is just, these numbers are just representing J and the O. Then we also have to find the S, H, U, A. So you'll find there'll be a series of zeros and ones put together, which will form the name Joshua. So this is how the computer understands, reads the name Joshua. But for us, it has to also convert it from the way it understands it to the way we can understand it. Okay, Joshua, is it clear? Joshua, have I answered you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please. Good luck. You have a question?
No.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. So that is it. The conversions between. Okay. All right. So now let's move on to the next slide. Now that will mark the end of our computer memory sizes or memory. Now let's look at what we call secondary storage. All along we have been looking at what we call primary storage devices. We said the primaries are the internal ones, the ones we find inside. Okay. Then I'm going to introduce the storage device in this first session because we have less than 1 minute. Then you'll immediately join for the second session so that we can finish the storage devices today. Next time we meet, we shall look at something else. Okay. Now, just as an introduction, we said the storage devices. Now, the secondary storage devices are the external ones, the ones we use externally. For example, your flash disks, your memory cards, okay, your external hard disks. All those are examples of secondary storage devices. Now, we have to understand that the secondary storage devices store information permanently. Okay, they store information permanently unless you go and delete. If you delete your work, of course, that's when you lose it. But even in Windows still, when you delete, you don't lose your work completely. You can still recover it from what we call the recycle bin. Okay. Also in other operating systems. So looking at what we call secondary storage devices, these are some of the few examples. Okay. Now here we have an external hard disk. That is actually how the hard disk looks like internally. Okay. We have the floppy disk here. We have the magnetic tape, the DVDs, and the microphones here. And then we also have the pen drive or the flash. So these are some of the examples of the secondary storage devices. Now, we have to categorize these storage devices, okay? The storage media is categorized. Okay. Please, members, you keep an eye on the chat section. You can get more information from there, okay? Okay. Now, when we look at the secondary, the secondary devices, we categorize them, okay? we categorize them according to the way they store their information, or they write the information to them, to their surfaces. Okay. Now, when we categorize them, we categorize them into three types. The three types include the magnetic types, the magnetic storage devices, the solid state storage devices, the optical storage devices. So we are going to look at these one by one. Right now, we have just stated them. Okay. Now, starting with what we call the magnetic storage devices. Now, the magnetic storage devices store their information on what we call a magnetic surface. Why we call it a magnetic surface? Because the surface on which they store the information is coated with a magnetic what? With a magnetic material. For example, when you look at your magnetic tapes at home, those tapes that have something like a rope inside them, that rope is where information is. When you look at it, it looks kind of dark, not so. Now, that is the magnetic surface we're talking about. Now, when you open a hard disk, inside you still find that same surface which has the magnetic material on it. Even the floppy disk, when it's open, in this diagram here, we see an open floppy disk. This surface is the magnetic surface onto which the data is going to be stored. So this is the mechanism they use for storing their devices. Okay, I mean their data or information. That is why we call them magnetic storage devices, because they contain a magnetic material onto which they write information. Now, what are the advantages of these? What you have to understand that most of the storage devices that use the magnetic surface have more data storage space compared to other primary storage devices. Then they also offer faster data access. For example, now in our computers, we have the hard disks where the operating system sits. So data access is fast. Then we also have what we call seek time. Okay. Excuse me. We have what we call seek time when we are dealing with these computer memories. Now we have to understand that the seek time refers to the time it takes. The time it takes to do what? To read or write the head, to read or write head to locate the correct track. Okay. Now, let me just explain that a little bit more. We have to understand the difference, first of all, between the seek time and the latency. Okay. Latency, we have said, refers to the time it takes to the read or write head to locate the correct sector. Now, what we must understand is that the seek time is the time taken for a hard disk controller, okay, for a hard disk controller to locate a specific piece of stored data. That is what we call a seek time. We are seeking something. So the time taken for a hard disk controller, or for a hard disk, or for a magnetic storage device to do what? To fetch, to find, to locate a specific piece of stored data is what we call the seek time. I hope it is clear. Okay, I hope that is clear. Let me repeat it. The seek time, hoping that some of you are taking notes. The seek time refers to the time taken by a hard disk controller to locate what? To locate some stored data. Now, looking at latency. Looking at latency. The latency defines the delay between the delay taken, okay? The delay taken for this storage, the hard disk controller to identify or to locate the storage device is the delay, okay? Now, the time it takes to read or write head to locate the correct sector, that is what we call the latency. Then we have access time. It is the addition of the seek time and the latency. Okay, the access time is the addition of the seek time and latency. Now, the other advantages may include it supplements the RAM, especially when we talk in the line of the virtual memory. The one I explained, saying that when you have little RAM, It creates some virtual memory from the hard disk and adds it to the RAM so that the information or the program can run smoothly. Then they also help to store data permanently, and they have a long lifespan. Now, just like human beings have a lifespan, these devices also have a lifespan. Time will reach when they'll just stop working because they have a lifespan. Now we have programs which we can run on our computers to actually identify how long your hard disk is going to last. So if you buy a hard disk, don't just buy it. Tell them, please, I want to know how long this hard disk is going to last. There are programs that can actually tell you that this hard disk is going to stay for this number of years. When those number of years expire, it also dies just like that. Okay. All right. You see, someone is saying his crashed. It was 500 GB new and it crashed. So you have to be careful. Next time, you'll have to tell them, please, first measure how long it's going to take. So something may look new. That is why they say when you don't use machines, they can also die. Sometimes you have to use them in order for them to be safe. Now someone is asking, Darren, if the hard disk stops working, can you still get the data stored? No, you cannot. If it stops working, it has stopped. That is why we have what we call backing up. So you should have backed up your work somewhere. Okay, you should have backed up your work somewhere. Okay, let's look at the disadvantages. Of course, because they store information and we need they store a large amounts of storage, amounts of data, they are what? Okay, because they store large amounts of data, they are kind of expensive. They are relatively expensive. And then they are also heavy, okay? When you hold a hard disk and you try to fill it, it is very heavy compared to the primary storage devices or other storage devices. Then they can also crash. When they crash, you lose the information, okay? Sometimes when it stops working, that's when we say it has crashed, okay? You lose the information. This is what someone was asking in the chat section. Okay, so those are the magnetic storage devices, the hard disk. Then the second type is what we call the floppy disks. Okay, the floppy disk drive. Now the floppy disk is also another example of the magnetic storage device. Now what are the advantages? They are cheaper than the hard disks and the CD-ROMs. They are portable. These ones, they are portable. They are used to transfer data information from one computer to another. So meaning if you use it today here at home, you can actually move video information and you go and share it on another computer, probably at college, okay? Then they can offer direct access and they are faster than magnetic tapes. Now, when we talk about magnetic tapes, we are looking at those your recordables, your tapes were from which you used to hear music from, okay? Or the ones you used to watching videos from. So the floppy disks are actually faster when you compare them to the magnetic tapes. Then they facilitate data transfer. They are easily edited and formatted. Okay. So those are the advantages. The disadvantages are they are actually difficult and delicate to handle. When they fall down and they break, it might be the end. Sometimes they are easily corrupted. You can easily carry a virus from another computer on this floppy disk. Okay. And then they are relatively short lifespan compared to what? Compared to the other what? Compared to the other magnetic storage devices. And then they hold relatively small amounts of data. When you actually notice, when you have a floppy disk, you'll find that the amount of space in it is just in MBs. Okay, it is in MBs. Okay, so how do we take care of the floppy diskettes? Don't put the diskette near any magnetic fields, because when you put a magnetic material in a magnetic field, what happens? It kind of reacts. It kind of reacts to the environment, to the fields. Okay, then don't expose the diskette to direct sunshine or heat. There you will lose it, or you will spoil it. Then you should store it in a cool, dry, dusty-free environment. Okay, You should not spill liquids onto the diskette. Spilling liquids, actually, computers and liquids, they don't connect. That is one thing. Now, someone is asking, does the information on the disk fade off? No, it doesn't fade off. I told you information is permanent. Okay, the information stored on it is permanent unless you delete it. Those are permanent storage, the secondary storage devices. Okay, now let's look at what we call optical storage devices. Just from the name optical, you can actually sense that we're dealing with light. Now, these storage devices use light technology. They use laser light to write information onto the surfaces. They have shiny surfaces onto which information will be written or data is going to be stored. So these are the common means of distributing software to computers nowadays. Okay, people use these CDs, the optical storage media, to transfer setups from one computer to another, distributing software. Even operating systems are being put on CDs. Okay, they look exactly like the musical CDs that we know for playing music and so on. Okay, the ones we normally put in our radios, they look like that, but they are not. They are not the ones. They are the ones we use for storing data and so on. Now, these devices, the optical storage media, they store a large amount of information, up to about 650 MBs in the form of text, sound, and even still pictures. Joshua Wakoli, you have a question?
Yes, like also I was trying to ask because there are some CDs that used to be black and white.
So black and white.
Would they also use laser light for recording data?
Now those are not the CDs. You're talking about what? Those it's an
records.
They are called records, yeah. Okay, they are not CDs, they are called records. So how they store information on their surfaces. Excuse me.
Hello?
Okay. How they store records, I think it's different from the way these optical storage media do theirs. Okay. So they are not CDs, they don't fall under this. Okay. All right. So we are saying these ones use what we call laser beams to record the information. Now, CDs can be found in about 4 different forms. We can find them in about 4 different forms. That is the CD-ROMs. We have the CD-RAs, which stands for recordables. We have the CD-writables. Okay. We also have the DVDs. So we are going to look at this and understand them even more. Okay. Now let's start looking at by the compact discs. Now here we look at examples like the CD-ROM, the CD recordable, and the CD rewritable. Now when we look at the CD-ROMs, the word CD stands for compact discs. Now the letters in the CD-ROM, the CDROMS, stand for compact disc read-only memory, okay? Which means you can only read information, but you cannot change anything, either by deleting or by adding new information. So it comes when the information is put there and you cannot change it. That is read-only memory. Your work is only to read, to feed off. This is the type of CDs most people who have libraries, video libraries, use. You find your movie has Mortal Kombat, you can't remove that Mortal Kombat and you change it to something else, or you can't delete the movie. Whatever is put there is stored permanently. Okay, that is why we have so many CDs at home piled of movies you have watched. If it was possible to change them, probably we would only buy one CD and we keep on using it for different movies. Okay, that is for CD-ROMs. Then we have what we call CD-RAs. They are called CD recordables. Now these are blank CDs that the users can write on, but once only. Okay, once only. using a CD writer, which can be either external or internal. Now, this type is mostly used to put things like songs and so on. So you only write in them once, meaning if you put something which is less than the storage capacity, you cannot remove what you have put, but you can add more. Okay, you can add more until the storage space is depleted. Okay, now the difference between the CD-RA and the CD-ROMs is that for the ROMs, you can't add anything else, even if there's free space on it. But these ones, you can add anything else so long as there's free space, but you can't change. Okay, then we have what we call rewritables. These are what we call the CD-RWs. Okay, they are rewritable CDs, which means the users can read and write many times as if they are using a hard disk. Okay, most of the times here you can remove whatever you've put there, you can add more, you can delete, you can do anything because it is a CD rewritable. Now, someone would probably ask, how do I know that this is a CD, a rewritable or a recordable or a CD-ROM? Most of the times people, these CDs, when they come out, they actually tell you the type of CD it is because the representations are put on them. For example, when you look at these images, you'll know that this is a CD-ROM because they have labeled it there, CD-ROM, Sony, CD-RA, then CD-RW. So these are put on them so that people can know that this is actually a recordable or a rewritable. Okay, that is how we can know what type of CD it is. Now, let's look at the DVDs. Okay, now the DVDs are categorized also almost in the same way the CD-ROMs are categorized. Now, the difference between the DVDs and the CDs is that, excuse me, the difference between the DVDs and the CDs is that the DVDs have more storage space compared to the CDs. Okay, the DVDs have more storage space compared to the CDs. Now, in order for us to play whatever is on the DVD, we use what we call a DVD player, a device that plays the DVDs produced under both the video RAM and the DVD rewritables. Okay, we use a DVD reader, a DVD player to play information from a DVD. So they are also categorized in the same way. Instead, we have DVD RAM instead of DVD ROM. Then we also have recordable and rewritable. Okay, now the DVD RAM stands for sorry, my network is kind of unstable. Let me just put, okay. All right, the DVD RAM, when we look at the DVD RAM stands for what we call digital versatile, excuse me, digital versatile, recordable and writable. Okay, so it is rewritable and recordable of the versions of DVD-ROM. So this comes from what we call a DVD-ROM. Okay, sorry. So it allows items to be erased and recorded on it multiple times. Are we together? So in other words, this comes from a DVD-ROM, which is read-only memory. Okay. Now we have also the DVD-RAs, which stands for DVD recordable, digital versatile disc recordable. Okay, then we also have the DVD rewritables. These are the ones which can be recordable. You can change information and you can also remove information at any time. Okay, now some of these have when you compare it to the other types, the rewritables have more space compared to more storage space compared to the others. Okay, some other disks even have both surfaces used for writing, for storing information, meaning you can use both surfaces. Once the other side is done, you can turn the other side and you also store information there. So we have to understand how to use these things. For example, if you're in the computer lab and you're being taught practicals by Mr. Mukulu, and then you reach that part, the part where you're supposed to burn work on a CD. Now, as a computer student, you should actually understand how to insert these things into the system unit. Some people end up spoiling the system units just because they have inserted the CDs in a wrong way into the system units. So you must understand these things. Now you are going to look for more. You will do more research on these things. Maxwell, okay. All right, so those are the DVDs, okay? Those are the DVDs. Now let's look at the advantages of these discs over the hard disk. The main advantage is that the compact disk is more portable than the hard disk. This comes in relation to how heavy they are. The hard disks are heavier compared to the CDs. In fact, you can put a CD in your pocket without anyone noticing, actually without you noticing, because it is lightweight, okay? So it is more portable. That is the only advantage. Kayemba, you have a question. Please unmute and ask your question.
Sir, my question is, why is it that when the CD gets scratches on that part where the data is stored, why is it that the data, like if it's a movie and you put it in and you put the CD in a DVD, the movie will even start, the flow of the video will not be the same as when it didn't have scratches. Why is that so?
Okay, now this is what you should understand. As the computer, as data is being put onto this surface, the laser light, which I talked about, the laser beam, is going to, before this surface comes when it is very smooth, okay? But when we expose it, when we write that on it, you'll actually notice that some of the parts of this surface has changed its color. Now, if you observe this surface under a microscope, you'll actually notice that the part which contains the data is not smooth compared to what? The part which has data. Now, if we have that surface which has data, it's not smooth, meaning the light was burning the surface using some intensities, okay? Like somewhere it would be high intensity, low intensity, causing grooves on this surface. Now, when you make a scratch, it's like you're removing part of the grooves, okay? The data is going to be lost. Now, that surface onto which information is being written actually can be removed. So when you scratch it, it's like you're scratching off the data or a part of where the data was written. It's like on a motherboard, we have wires which run on the motherboard. When a scratch happens when you get a scratch on the motherboard, you should have cut, probably, because those lines you see on the motherboard are very tiny wires. They're tiny wires, just like the surface of this compact disk, where we have tiny fragments of grooves and so on, onto which the data has been written. When you scratch it off, it's like you're cutting off part of the data. That is why the video becomes unstable. Some glitches are there because it is trying to skip to the next. Sometimes it even fails to read because the data is completely, that at that point has been removed. That is why we get those problems. So when you just make a scratch, it's like you've removed some of the data. That is why sometimes when you do that, it reaches a point the video stops playing or the music stops playing because it no longer can read data smoothly. You have scratched off some of the surface onto which this data was written. So I don't know if I've tried to answer you, or I don't know if you've gotten it. If you
Yes, sir, I have gotten it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
card. All right, now let's look at the advantages of the CD over the floppy disk. Now, when you compare the CD and the floppy disk, the CD has certain advantages over the CD. First of all, the storage capacity is more than that of a floppy disk. Then also the average access time of a compact disk is faster than that of a floppy disk, meaning the time it takes to find data on it is less than that the floppy disk takes to access data on it. Okay, so the average access time, we said the access time refers to the seek time plus the latency. Okay, we already defined those terms. Now, what are the disadvantages? Some kinds of compact disks are read only. Now, some of us would want to use our CDs over and over again for doing very many different things, but because they are read only, you'll be actually forced to only use it once. Meaning you only use it once. If you are someone who doesn't like to repeat what you have watched or what you have heard or music you've heard, you can throw it away actually, because you can't do it. You can't use it for any other thing. It is read only. You can only read information from it. You cannot delete. You cannot add. Okay. Now, the average access time of the compact disk is slower than that of a hard disk also. We have to understand that. Okay. Now, let's look at what we call solid state. Now, solid state storage devices, we have an example. The examples include the flash disks and the flash sticks and so on. Now, these solid state storage device media, they don't have moving parts. Why we call them solid state is because they don't have moving parts. Now, when you look at the magnetic storage and even the optical, these ones move when that is being read from them. That's why when you insert a DVD in the DVD player, you hear it rotating. Okay, it's moving. Then the hard disk, it also makes noise. When your computer is running and it's using a hard disk, it makes noise. However, now we have what we call SSDs. They are solid state hard disks, which don't have moving parts. This is an example. They come in two types, either like that or as a chip, which we can put on our motherboard. So these ones don't need moving, but they don't have moving parts. Most of them are actually made up of chips, okay, from silicon chips, and they store data electronically, okay. They don't store data on those mechanical media, or on those magnetic media and so on, or the surfaces for optical media, storage media. Okay. So for them, they store information electronically on chips like these ones and those and so on. So when we talk about electronically, there we are dealing with electrons. Okay, we're dealing with electrons. So they don't have moving mechanical parts. So this allows the drives to actually consume less power compared to the traditional magnetic drives. Okay, so examples include the pen stick, the flash stick, and then we have the SSDs, solid state disk storage hard drives. And then we also have the pen drive. We have the cache memory, which is on the motherboard we talked about. Okay. Now we also have what we call the smart card. Now, when we talk about the smart card, here we are making use of a small chip which is embedded into these cards, onto which information is stored. For example, when you look at your bank, your ATM cards, or ATM cards for your parents, you'll notice that all of them almost have something like that. Even our SIM cards in our phones, they have that small surface. Now, that surface acts as a contact between whatever is storing our information and the phones and the devices into which they're inserted. Okay, so we can use this to store information, but they store only little information which is related to your account, for example, the PIN and so on. Okay, all right. Then we also have the SSD. Now, this is a storage device. Most computers nowadays come with this chip in them instead of our hard disks. So instead of you hearing noise, you'll find that the computer is running, but it is even very silent because it is storing information on what we call an SSD, which is a storage device for storing any data. Okay, it works exactly the way these others work in our computers, but the only difference is that they are SSD. Chiberu, you want to say something? Chiberu, you want to say something? Okay. Those are the SSDs. Then other solid state storage media include what we call the data logger. Now for the data logger, in very harsh conditions, we need to capture some data. For example, under the ocean, when we want to feel whether an earthquake is coming, we normally insert what we call data loggers under the ocean. To do what? To record signals from the vibrations of under the bed of the sea or the water body or on the earth's surface and so on. Sometimes we put this in very high temperature places to record to capture certain data. Now this data is going to be managed remotely, meaning the data logger can be somewhere very far, and then the information will be transmitted to the computers for analysis. So they store data which is received from the sensors, okay? In order for it to capture the data, it has to sense whatever is happening. For example, temperature changes, okay? The seismognostic activities, okay? So those activities that happen underground, those forces, when they start vibrating, these sensors capture data, which in turn will be stored or sent to a computer for assessment. Okay, that is what we call a data logger. Okay, so it can be, the data logger can just be left alone to collect the data over a long period of time in hostile places such as on satellite, at the bottom of the ocean, and so on. Okay. Then we have the cache. We already talked about the cache, a very fast memory. So what is the storage capacity of the SSD? Now, the storage capacity of the SSD depends on what you want. There are very many. There are 250 GB SSDs, even 500 GB SSDs. Just like the storage capacities of our hard disks also vary. Okay. How are the SSDs affected by virus? SSD is solid state drive. Roman, SSD solid state drive. Okay, some of these questions you'll ask them on the WhatsApp group. I'll be able to answer them because right now we're running out of time. I intended to finish this lesson today, and we only have 3 minutes to finish. Luckily enough, we're almost the end. Okay, or let me finish explaining this, then you can answer. You can ask the questions in the few minutes left. Okay. So we say the microchip or the cache micro is near the CPU. For one reason, the CPU has to access information from this cache at a very fast speed. Okay, so when it fetches information from the cache memory is going to be fast. Okay, it is faster than any other memory. That's why we call it a fast memory from which the CPU can actually get its information from. Okay. All right. Now let's look at the differences between primary and secondary memory. Okay. This will mark the end of our lesson. So the difference between primary, we said data can be processed directly from storage. That is when we looked at the RAM, where the program has to be loaded for the primary. Now, I represented this in a tabular format in order for us to see the differences clearly. Primary data can be processed directly from the storage, okay? Secondary data cannot be processed directly, but must be moved into the main memory. Now, the main memory here we're talking about is the RAM, okay? The RAM is an example of the primary storage device, okay? For it, the data is on it and it processes it directly. But for a secondary device, for example, if you have your hard disk and you want to maybe watch a video from your hard disk, this video has to be loaded onto the RAM first, which is the main memory, before it starts running. The primary memory is found on the motherboard. The secondary is located outside. The primary is more expensive compared to the secondary. The lower storage capacity for primary, higher storage capacity for secondary. Faster access time because it's on the motherboard and near the CPU for the primary devices, then slow access time because they are external. Okay, information has to move over long distance. And then we have volatile and non-volatile. We explained what volatile means. Volatile means information will be lost or that data will be lost when the computer goes off. Non-volatile is the actual opposite of that. Information can stay unless you remove it yourself. Okay, so those are the differences we can see. That will mark the end of our lesson for today.